All right, let's call. Oh. All right, let's call this. Is this on? Can you hear me back there? Can you hear this? Yeah? All right, good. All right, let's call this meeting to order. Finance Committee for April 2022. Mark, public speakers.
Good afternoon. Yes, we have 5 speakers, 3 in person, 2 virtual. We will start with Omar Vera.
Hey, all I have to say though is just keep with the Omni rollout. Eventually, we need the Omni card that would be unlimited. But I like the deal that if you tap 12 times over the course of the week, you get a free ride. Well, free rides, unlimited free rides for the rest of the week. But just keep the rollout going and spend the money wisely. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Speaker number 2, Jason Anthony.
Yeah, the man of the month, Jason Anthony from Amazon Labor Union, the first worker-led independent union from the entire United States of America and created in New York City. Let's talk about finance. Amazon is one of those employers that is in our city, but has created a burden on Amazon workers like myself. But let's say the MTA also invests money in corporations like Amazon. And investing money in corporations like Amazon is no bueno. And let's invest in wisely stuff. Let's break the norm like my brother and President Chris Malls does all the time. So let's do creative things. Let's fix our infrastructure that is creeping all the time. Like I saw one comment on Facebook that said, "Fix your subway, it sucks." And I was like so disgusted to see that comment, and I was like, what the hell this person is talking about? And I wanted to bring that comment to your attention, and let's get to work, guys. And I need more board members to be vocal. Let's be vocal. I'll see you guys in the next meeting.
Thank you. The third in-person speaker is Murray Bowden.
This is the story about one line on the Henry Hudson Bridge that's wrong, that's going to cost the MTA tens of millions of dollars unnecessarily. Now, $1,000 is not much, but when you're talking about 10 million or 100 million unnecessary, that should get your attention. The line under the Henry Hudson Bridge on the left side is supposed to be yellow because, for the driver's information, the left side of your road is yellow. There's an entrance to a building there, but there's no sign that says you can't go in or anything else. Multiply that error, which gives permission to every traffic engineer around here to use wrong lines. Like underneath the George Washington Bridge, there's a split that goes to the bridge and it goes straight ahead. The line is wrong. Aggressive drivers take advantage of that, ride down the left lane, and then cut into traffic, causing road rage. I brought this to the attention of the board. There are 100,000 traffic engineers don't want to be embarrassed because they've been doing it wrong for 25 years. I can't do it. I'm be 89. May never be here again. You want to save $100 million? Correct that one line on a Henry Hudson Bridge will set the pattern for people to understand. Follow the law as currently written in the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. Nothing new is created. Only follow the law as currently written.
Thank you. Next, we move to the virtual speakers. The first one is Charlton D'Souza.
My name is Charlton D'Souza, president of Passengers United. And for the Finance Committee, I spoke with State Senator Leroy Comrie last week, and he told me that he's very concerned about city ticket being increased to 50 cents. This was something that I had complained to the MTA board and to the committee at last month's meeting. And so in December, when you guys voted on increasing city ticket from $4.50 to $5, y'all never had, that wasn't really told to the elected officials. And now, many constituents who live in Southeast Queens, including myself, we're fed up of paying $5 for city ticket when it should be $4.50 at all times. Now, I know you're probably saying, Mr. Chairman, and to the board members, you're probably saying, well, we gave you guys a discount, be grateful with it. Yes, but at the same time, city ticket was $4.50 before. So now if you take 2 trips, you're paying $1 extra. So that does have an impact on people. And I know it's not much, but a lot of people are struggling right now financially. It doesn't even come with the bus or subway transfer. And as far as Atlantic ticket is concerned, the $60 price is too expensive. State Senator Leroy Comrie did tell me he supports the weekly Atlantic ticket being $45. So guys, please work with him and let's see, we can get this amended and fixed sometime in May or even June, by June. Thank you so much, guys. And have a good afternoon.
Thank you. The final speaker is Christopher Grice.
Good afternoon. It's Christopher Grice, not Christ. I don't know where Christ comes from. First of all, good afternoon. I am also supporting about the Omni, as we're getting ready to do the Omni reduced fare. I'm very glad that I'm seeing that the Omni is getting more information coming in. But I want to remind everyone that we do have to make sure that if we are changing any fare information, we need to also remind that you need to show the reduced fare price on everything from railroads to subways and buses. It's sometimes not on the website, but sometimes it is on the Long Island Railroad as well as on Metro North. Can we please make sure if any new fare changes comes in, please show us if the half fare price. It makes it easy for people who have Social Security, disability, or has a disability, so therefore they can budget their money. That also makes it easier for a lot of the customers who have a disability, who have the reduced fare card. Thank you so much. And it's Christopher Grice, Greif. I stand Grife, not Grief. Thank you.
Thank you. And this concludes the public speakers.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, can I get an approval of the March 28th minutes, please? All right, second. Any edits, changes, deletions? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstentions. Okay, that passes. Next, Mark, give us the budget watch, please.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Budget Watch is included in the exhibit book and was distributed to you today. Before reporting on the specific numbers, I did want to note that we updated the format and some of the content in the Budget Watch based on the feedback we received at the last committee meeting. Among other things, we added a table at the top that summarizes expenses and revenues together. And we also heard you were interested in seeing the revenues tracked versus the McKinsey projections, best case, worst case scenarios, and the midpoint, which we've added as well. Certainly open to continuing to update the format and contact based on feedback. So we're happy to entertain anything further.
All right.
On to the specific numbers. In this particular report, we're comparing the operating results through March and the subsidies received through April versus the adopted budget. I always start with fare box and toll revenue, as you know, since they're particularly critical to our financial condition. As reported at many of the committees earlier today, particularly transit, ridership remains well below the pre-pandemic levels, and we're still falling well short of our revenue targets in the budget. Through the end of March, fare box revenue was $170 million below budget year to date, with shortfalls at all of the agencies. Transit and MTA bus were down 16%. Long Island Railroad was down 21% versus budget, and Metro North was down 18%. On the flip side, toll revenue is favorable, $22 million versus the adopted budget year to date, as the total crossings have been meeting the targets and have been close to pre-pandemic levels. There is some modest good news in the sense that the magnitude of our losses has dropped compared to prior months. So when you take fares and tolls together for the month of March only, we fell $1 million short of the budgeted projection. In February, that shortfall was $47 million. So for the month of only, that was positive. But it is important to remember that the financial plan assumes that fare box revenue will continue to grow and ridership will continue to grow through the rest of the year. So the budget shortfalls will rise and widen, and the gaps will widen if we don't continue to see continued growth beyond where we are today. Moving to operating expenses. Through the end of March, the expenses were $247 million below the budget. And it's important to note here that some of it is timing related and some of it is true savings. We're early in the year. And we're going to keep monitoring those categories closely, the cost categories. The biggest driver, one of the most significant drivers here, is payroll, which was $96 million below budget. And that's largely due to the existence of vacancies at all of the agencies. At the end of March, there were 4,889 vacancies, of which over 3,000 were non-reimbursable positions. Overtime expenditures exceeded the budget through March by $60 million, primarily related to vacancy and absentee coverage at transit. Debt service expenses were $21 million favorable, and that reflects the timing of deposits at lower than projected rates. Moving on to subsidies, this is through April now. Subsidies were favorable by $203 million. The main driver of this result was the real estate transaction taxes, which were $230 million favorable. Payroll mobility tax was also favorable by $20 million. MTA aid, tongue twister, was down $16 million. Petroleum business tax was down $15 million, and the for-hire vehicle surcharge was also down by $16 million. So that's a summary of the financial performance through March and April. Certainly, if there are any questions, happy to take them.
Board members, questions? So, please go ahead.
Sorry. Tell me the vacancy number. Was it 4,000 what?
The total number of vacancies as of the end of March was 4,889, of which 3,120 were non-reimbursable. The rest were reimbursable, mostly capital positions.
All right. Thank you.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
So, thanks, Mark. Just following up and to give the committee an update on the McKinsey study, which, it's underway. We're having, they're doing the work and we're having weekly calls. The, approach is really to get from McKinsey a forecast of a high range and then a low range, kind of, I'll say best case, worst case, but there can always be cases that are worse than the worst case. But and within each scenario, there's a number of factors that will drive. The biggest one being, future of office work, i.e., what's the prognosis from work from home? Approximately 35% of MTA's customers, based on the sector they work in, have the choice to work from home, and what's that going to look like over the next few years. The other factors that will be adjusted between the two different scenarios are economic growth of the region in terms of regional employment and GDP, as well as population changes, looking at the outmigration that is taken effect. And then specific to the system, confidence and safety, people's belief that, is it safe, and how does that affect their choice versus alternatives, and different fare evasion expectations. Are we going to stay, where we are in terms of the current leakage from fare evasion, or will it actually build and get worse? So those are kind of the main drivers that we can, which will give us a range of outcomes, and we can tweak. Interestingly, from a COVID perspective, McKinsey's view is that the modeling will just assume we're in this, that COVID is an, endemic, and not, that there won't be, between the different scenarios, much different changes in COVID, but really kind of the fallout, both economically and commuting preferences post COVID. So it's underway. It'll be incorporated in the July financial plan, which we will expect will have different results than what we're currently assuming. But that's the update.
David?
Yeah, I know it's not directly related to the day-to-day expenses, but where does congestion pricing fit into this? And for two different vantage points, theoretically, congestion pricing might force, or not force, make people reconsider coming in, and that would have an impact, some impact in terms of the revenue projection. I saw in the press, obviously, that we finally got something from the feds that we're supposed to be responding to, but I'd be interested in how you see this fitting.
Right. So, just again to review, and Pat, feel free to jump in if I miss anything, but the timing on congestion pricing is the balance of the year for the environmental review, and then it's approximately a year from approval to be up and running, which would get us into a revenue phase, call it early 2024. We are modeling, you're right, that congestion pricing, is expected to have a positive impact on the system by trying to, have more choose transit as an alternative rather than driving. And for those who will drive, making our bridge and tunnel facilities more competitive with the free crossings to get in. So we're modeling the impact of that. But again, the biggest driver is going to be certainly the future of office work and commuter patterns, which is will be impacted by congestion pricing in a positive way, but not the biggest determinant.
Okay, I just have a couple. Jerry, you got some? Go ahead.
Okay, I don't know how doable this is, but would there be some way in the future that we could get every month just a quick recap, just a couple of bullet points about the overtime spending? And the reason I bring this up is because the media likes to feed on this. Just this past week, they were having a frenzy with the Long Island Railroad because certain people were doubling their salaries, et cetera, et cetera. When you put it out here, weather-related responses, covering for, vacancies, things of that nature. It makes it a lot easier if we get a call from a reporter or something. Oh, what do you think about this? It's nice to have some ammunition to come back and say, well, listen, it's not as bad as it sounds. You got this reason, that reason, and the other reason. Just, something like little bullet points that we get from you so that we know that it's legitimate and,
Jerry,
and sometimes that's all
Jerry, just check page 3 of the budget watch and see if that floats your boat.
Okay.
And just take a look and let us know.
Yeah, I'll also add, in addition, if you need a summary, we can add that. But each of the committee books for each of the agencies has 2 slides, very concise slides on overtime by reimbursable and non-reimbursable,
Okay.
which could be helpful as well.
All right, no, I appreciate that. Thank you.
And let's just look at this table and some of the.
All right, thank you. So it's a couple of points I want to make in budget one. First of all, thank you for the adjustment to the addition of this chart. I don't know if anyone could take a look at this, or maybe we can put it on the screen for a sec, Mark. The far left chart on the. If it's too hard to put on the screen, then we can just. Don't worry about it. If it's too hard, so just fellow board members, just take a look at this. Yeah, all right, this chart here. So as I understand it, the black line is performance, and our budget was on the midpoint of the McKinsey study. Is that correct?
That's correct. The solid green line,
Right.
if you look on the, which is the midpoint between the.
This is the second page of Budget Watch, the piece of paper right in front of your computer. Yeah, yeah. So if you look at for board members, you look at the area underneath the green line, the solid green line, between the solid green line and the solid black line, that's our gap. That's our gap, which in the first 2 months of the year, first 3 months of the year was $170 million. So we're fighting to close that gap. And I think, as you thoughtfully said, we're fighting against work from home. We're fighting against people leaving the state for warmer and less, onerous climes, maybe. We're fighting it. And this organization is going to be dependent on. So even when we have a revised study by the July plan, it may lower the green line, and we may be on that line then, but the gap we have, because we have a pretty heavy fixed cost base, it's not a lot of variable costs in our model. We're not going to reduce service any further. Let's hope we don't. But that is what this committee is doing. And the last thing I'll say is, I know you're going to come to us at some point with a more comprehensive cost takeout plan to drive out, but we can't cut our way to growth. We're not going to be able to cut our way to get there. We're going to have to find other revenue sources. We're going to have to rely upon businesses to get people back to work, because this system has to work for New York and the region. We just don't have, when I said New York, I meant New York. Yeah, state and city, the whole darn thing. And this committee can do its best to provide oversight, but we're going to need help from the top line, from the state, and the top line from riders. That's our burden in front of us. So, with that, Pat.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll begin with Finance Watch this afternoon on page 19 of the book. We'll begin with a transaction that occurred on March 24th. We entered into a new letter of credit with PNC Bank to replace an exiting continuing covenant agreement, or basically a private placement with Bank of America. And as you can see here, this will take us out to March of 2024, this new agreement. Next, on April 5th, we executed a $1 billion forward refunding of certain transportation revenue bonds that will be callable on November 15th of this year. And this transaction was unique in the sense that we sold bonds in April that will settle in August to refund the bonds that are due on November 15th. And effectively what we were trying to do is take off the table and lock in some of the savings with respect to those refundings, given that we are entering into an escalating rate environment now. This is a type of transaction that we really have never done before, but it really speaks to the unique market environment we find ourselves in, as well as the substantial amount of borrowing that we need to do in the second half of the year. So as you can see here, this transaction was led by Jeffries as well as senior co-manager. Oh, sorry, I'm on page 19 of the book. Turning to the top of page 20, you see the summary statistics of the transaction. Our all-in true interest cost for the borrowing was 2.8%. As you can see here, there's an average life of 6.92 years, and that speaks to the fact that those bonds that will be refunded or taken off the table in November have a fairly short life of just under 7 years. And of course, as normally, the state division of the budget waived the bond issuance charge for that issuance. Next, we have a letter of credit extension on some transportation revenue variable rate refunding bonds 2020 B1. And this was to extend our existing letter of credit with PNC Bank. So this was just a renewal of that one, again, for 2 years. You'll get an email soon from Marcia Tanian to let you know that we're printing a preliminary official statement today for another $1 billion PMT issue. And this issue will pay off a bond anticipation note that is coming due on May 15th. So this is a borrowing that we must do. And unique to this transaction is that our book running senior manager, Siebert Williams Schenk, is both a woman-owned firm and a minority-owned firm. They'll be working with Stern Brothers and Drexel Hamilton and Rice Financial Products on the transaction. So we'll report on that next month. Lastly, at the end of March, we executed a 2.8 million gallon ULSD fuel hedge. The winning bid was submitted by Cargill, and we locked in a price of $2.74 per gallon on that diesel hedge. Be happy to take any questions if there are any.
Board members' questions? Go ahead, Kevin, please.
Yeah, congrats to Pat and his team on the forward refunding, which really locked in $135 million of debt service savings that will help keep our debt service low throughout the financial plan period. And again, this was it's called forward, which sounds complicated, but it's basically getting investors to agree to lock in the interest rate today, even though the bonds are going to get delivered in August. And it was just a way to, again, as Pat described, we have plenty of bonds to issue and rates may be higher, may be lower, but this is a way to lock in some savings and not worry about those savings being lost to rising rates. And as a matter of fact, since the issue was sold, rates have gone up by, a good 30 basis points. So, I never want to congratulate someone for market timing because they'll, can be as wrong as many times as they can be good, but it was a good risk management strategy and budget savings approach. So,
Yeah, thanks. So, Pat, to that, I have two quick questions. One is just even a month ago, maybe 2 months ago for this board, pick a recent transaction of similar magnitude. What was the total in cost? Just roughly. If we're at 2.8% now, what was it a couple of months ago?
Sure. I'm just going to go into Finance Watch. And if we look at a transaction, part of the issue is if I compare it to a 30-year level debt or a 30-year structure, it's not going to compare equally because this is a shorter deal. But if I look at our for our inaugural PMT issuance in May of 21, that was a 2.02% all-in true interest cost. If I go forward to our 2022A, that was February 10th. Now again, that was a longer dated deal, but that all-in true interest cost was 3.18%.
With 10 years longer.
Not a pure apples to apples comparison, but it should indicate to you 2.8 for a 7-year average life, and that 2022A was a much longer life, but that was probably closer to 24 years on that one.
Yeah, so just so my colleagues and I, it's worth noting that interest rates are rising, and that's almost a whole percentage point in less than a year on a similar transaction. So we have to be mindful of that cost. And did you give a rough sense? What's the market trading at for a AA bond now, 2.8? Is it 30 basis points higher, 3.1? What should we have in our heads?
Our credit spreads have been widening out, and that's been a common occurrence with a lot of issuers in the market. Credit spreads, what we used to think about as a traditional transportation revenue credit spread of about 40 to 45 basis points is nearly double that now, and that just again speaks to not concerns about the credit, but the overall rate environment and the overall market environment we find ourselves in.
All right, well, thank you. Scary, but whether you have a mortgage at home or you have a $50 billion debt portfolio like ours, we have to think about it.
Yeah, just one follow-up commentary on that. Pat's group is monitoring, so for the February financial plan, which was based off the December budget when rates were lower, general tax-exempt rates are up, in the range of 150 basis points or 1.5%.
Right.
And so that increased interest cost will get incorporated in the July plan. But again, the fortunate thing is, that's for, for most of our debt portfolio, the interest rates are already locked in, and so it's the incremental over, this year and the next few years that'll have a impact on the debt service budget, which will be material, but very managed because so much of our portfolio we've already locked in fixed rates to the final maturity date.
All right, action items. Back to you, Pat.
Okay. So the first action item is on page 30 of your PDF on the iPad, and this is approval of transportation revenue anticipation notes. And let me just sorry. This resolution package will authorize MTA to enter into letters of credit or other agreements, or even issue publicly revenue anticipation notes for operating purposes. The board initially approved the issuance of what we call RANs in July of 2013, and we currently have 2 existing lines of credit outstanding, one with J.P. Morgan Chase Bank, and that's for $800 million, and with Bank of America for $400 million, so $1.2 billion. Both of those facilities will expire in August of this year. And in order to be prepared for that expiration, we are bringing to the board, we are seeking refreshed authorization of our ability to issue revenue anticipation notes, either through letters of credit with commercial banks like I just described, or if circumstances would require, we could even go into the market and issue publicly issued notes. So this refreshes that authorization. It's still seeking $3 billion in total authorization, but as I said, we only have $1.2 billion outstanding in the current environment, and it is our expectation that we'll renew those facilities with both J.P. Morgan and Bank of America in connection with this refreshed approval. The revenue anticipation notes can allow us to raise liquidity quickly in the public market if needed, and it just also gives us flexibility to more efficiently manage our liquidity needs, which are significant and large. And again, we're anticipating moving forward with replacement agreements with both of those banks going forward. Happy to take any questions.
Yeah, just to add on, again, you should think of this as standby conditional liquidity for, cash management purposes. This isn't, we're not looking to draw down this money and spend it. These are really standby facilities that are in place. And, we have seasonal liquidity needs. If there was some event that occurred, you always want to have, enough extra liquidity around. Now, we're actually in a pretty good liquidity spot right now because we've been drawing down the federal support for COVID and, banking that as we can as additional liquidity. So I'd almost view this as our first line of defense if we have a liquidity need is cash balance. After that are these facilities. We, don't anticipate having to draw or spend on them. And again, this wouldn't be deficit financing. In other words, we're not going to borrow under this program to meet a budget gap. This is just, if we're expecting money in the second half of the year and we have expenses in the first half, it bridges the timing gap. This is not any kind of deficit borrowing.
Yeah. David.
I would be supportive of this. We're in good financial condition. If you go when you're really in trouble, you can never get a line of credit.
That's a great point because these are 3-year facilities, so the banks are locked in for 3 years. We don't really anticipate needing it, but it's, again, keep the banks providing the facilities, keep renewing it and so forth, because you're exactly right. It's either much more expensive or not available if you wait to, the crisis.
Yep. Great. Other questions? All right, I've just got one for you. So it says here, J.P. Morgan and Bank of America. Are we not bidding it out to a wider set of banks?
No, we always bid it out. In fact, we do an annual liquidity solicitation every year. Typically it occurs in January, the first part of February. And we always, we have a board-approved list of banks that meet the board criteria. So we go to that whole list of banks, and I probably will get the number wrong. I think it's 12 that are approved. So they all are invited to respond. In terms of this particular request, the 2 banks that we heard from here were J.P. Morgan and Bank of America. But we're always interested in having as great a participation as possible in these programs.
Great. Okay. May I have a motion to delegate? Thank you. Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed. Abstentions. Motion carries. Okay. Second one, Pat.
Okay. Thank you. The second action item is the approval of statutorily required escalation payments for mortgage recording tax 1 and 2 receipts. These payments are required to be sent to Dutchess, Orange, and Rockland counties. This matter was presented to the board in February, where the total amount authorized for transfer was $7.533 million. We subsequently discovered an error in the formula that was used to calculate the payments to the counties, and so we're coming back for a correction. As you can see on the second page of the staff summary, there is some yellow highlighted language which shows you exactly what the board authorized in February, and the balance for this approval is a total of $8.324 million. Apologies, let me just go to the director's desk. So this is on page 49 of director's desk. And the hard copy should be in front of you, sorry. This was an unfortunate mistake, and I apologize for it. We are required to make these payments, and the error in the formula that was used to determine the February amount failed to capture all of the MRT2 receipts, and I've gone through this with our treasurer, Josiane Codillo, and again, this was just an unfortunate error, and this is intended to correct that error and make sure we remit the proper amounts as required by statute to the counties.
Well, I'm going to ask the Dutchess County rep to move it then. Well, actually, you can't technically. I'm sorry. You're not a member of the committee. I'm sorry. All right.
So moved.
Second. All right. Any discussion? Thank you for catching it, I think.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm glad you caught it. All right. All in favor, say aye.
Okay.
Aye. Opposed. Abstentions. Okay. Motion passes. All right, Pat, we're back to you for one more thing. You've got our variable rate presentation. Is that right?
Yes, I do, and I'll go through this fairly quickly. This is a standing work plan item, which is a review of the MTA's variable rate portfolio. Just to reground the board, the purpose of having, the board does have a variable rate policy, and it's described here in the italicized language, which basically dictates that no more than 25% of our debt outstanding can be unhedged variable rate debt, meaning it's just going to float variably. And so that policy is in place, and you'll see here where we currently are. Sorry. What we're talking about here is that small green slice on the pie chart, unhedged variable rate, 1.31 billion. At one point, maybe 12 years ago, that was a much higher number than 3%. It was closer to 15%. But given that we've had a fairly long, sustained period of being able to lock in low fixed rates, we've issued more fixed rate bonds. As you can see, we're almost 90% fixed rate bonds. Once those bonds are issued, they're locked in. But having variable rate debt is appropriate for an entity of our size, and obviously we're managing it well within the board parameters. You see other flavors of debt there that we have, which are synthetic fixed rate debt, 4%, and term rate debt, which is 4%. Term rate products are typically what we issue as put bonds. They have a longer maturity, but a short marketing life, maybe 3, 4, 5 years. In that 3 year, when that remarketing comes up, we'll just put that note back out, put that bond back out. Typically, we see only 2 types of variable rate debt in our portfolio: traditional variable rate demand bonds, of essentially backed by letters of credit, like I described earlier, when we have a wide variety of banks that participate in providing those letters of credit. The interest rate changes either daily or weekly on a variable rate demand bond, and we try to have a balance. We have about equal balance of both daily and weekly demand bonds. Different market environments, result in differing interest in those 2 products, and so having good amounts of both out there helps in that regard, meeting market demand. The other important variable rate product that we have in our portfolio are floating rate notes, or FRNs. You see we have 1.2 billion outstanding, and this interest rate is determined based on a set spread to an index. For example, SIFMA, which is the Securities and Industry Financial Markets Association Municipal Swap Index, or SOFR, which is the Secured Overnight Funding Rate, or LIBOR. Obviously, we are not entering into any new LIBOR agreements due to the fact that LIBOR will be going away, has already begun to start to go away. So when we think about floating rate notes, we're really thinking about SIFMA or SOFR. And this just gives you a sort of a visual picture of the dispersion of those variable rate products within the portfolio. And as you can see here over time, how the variable rate portfolio has shrunk as an overall part of the MTA's outstanding debt. Again, not because we don't like variable rate. Variable rate debt is very attractive and it's important to have in the portfolio. But as I said, we've come out of a very long period of great fixed rates. And this just gives you a sense of market volatility that we've seen over time, going back to 2017 in the case of 30-year tax-exempt bond rates. And then as you see on the right, you have the weekly SIFMA rate. The weekly SIFMA rate is really the best proxy for how our variable rate portfolio is performing. So as you can see, those rates have been really under 1% since the outbreak of the COVID pandemic. And notwithstanding that spike that occurred at the beginning of the pandemic, we've had a kind of a long run of very low rates. And I'm just looking anecdotally at some of our rate resets that are coming in today. These bonds are resetting at like 0.3%, 0.35% in the current market. So, but it does really what this shows you is just the fact is that the markets are go up and down, and it does have an effect on our cost of funds. Specifically on our 2021 performance, here you see RBI, which is the Revenue Bond Index, at 2.54% for the year. the 30-year municipal market data of 1.54%. And then, but let me just take you down to the bottom of that list. MTA variable rate bonds during this period cost an average of 0.64% over the 2021 year. This is just rate. This is just rate. Support cost would be additional to that. Is Stephen here? Support costs in or out? Remarketing and LOC fees are in. I apologize.
Okay.
It's inclusive of support cost. Thank you.
Right. So kind of the all-in.
That's our all-in costs. And so,
Thanks.
obviously, it does represent a very attractive component of the portfolio. This just gives you a sense of what of how these bonds need to be remarketed and reset periodically. In the current year, you can see we have $788 million of expiring liquidity, $394 million of FRNs coming due, and $278 million of term rate bonds coming due. So as we enter the market with these other transactions, we'll look for opportunities to build in a remarketing component for a variable rate component if the timing works out, and we'll try to do that just to gain some momentum with our other transactions that we have to do as well. And then there's just a couple leave-behinds in the appendix. I'll just go through those quickly. This just gives you a summary of all of our outstanding variable rate bonds, and some particular, some data points on their liquidity providers if they're relevant, and then when those facilities expire, and that's really our work plan. And this just gives you a feel for, Commissioner, you had asked, do we work with other banks, and this just gives you a flavor for the other banks, national commercial banks, and as well as international that participate in our program. So at this point, I'd be happy to take any questions if there are any.
Board members' questions on the 3% of our debt portfolio?
Yeah.
If that's not the tail wagging the dog, anything else? Any questions? Remind me in our work plan, when do we cover the dog, not the tail, when we cover all the fixed rate stuff?
Well, we cover that in January when we do a sort of a full debrief of the prior year, and then I'll come back to the board in October for a derivatives report. So you'll get.
All right. Well, all I'd say, Pat, is, and I don't like to change the work plan. I wouldn't mind maybe in private session or maybe other board members like. I think given the rate environment, wouldn't be the worst thing to hear a review of the fixed rate portfolio at some point. Just seems like it's more pressing than ever before.
Sure.
It's no rush.
We'd
but
be happy to get that together for you.
Line.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much. Procurements, I think we're up to, Kavesh.
Yes. Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair. On our procurement agenda for approval are two items that are being presented at other committees today. One for New York City Transit, which was approved by the New York City Transit MTA Bus Committee earlier today, and one for the Metro North Railroad, which will be presented to the Joint Railroad Committee later this afternoon. On the Metro North Long Island items, Metro North has one procurement action totaling $15,155,850. This action is for the ratification of an award to Alstom Signaling Incorporated to provide positive train control software upgrades, technical support, and field qualification services to enhance the automatic train control and advanced civil speed enforcement systems, ACES, installed on Metro North's railroad's M8 fleet. I submit this item for approval.
So, Michael, obviously we usually do this in the other order where we do it at the operating committee, but given schedules, we're doing it the reverse. With your permission, because I think you're going to be the acting chair of Metro North and Long Island Railroad today, I'll take a motion on this one, and unless there's some reason why, okay, second. Everyone wants to just
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? I'll hold my comments about that we're doing a PTC upgrade payment already, having just finished it, but that's okay. I'll hold it for later. You want some answers too? Okay, good. All right. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstentions. Very good. Kavesh, continue.
Thank you. I'm moving to New York City Transit. New York City Transit has one procurement totaling an estimated amount of $37.2 million. This item is for the exercise of an option to purchase 52 R252 flat cars from Hasco Metro Rail that will replace an aging fleet and will be used by New York City Transit Department of Subways. This option includes related non-car items such as spare parts and technical documentation. A flat car, when moved by a locomotive, is designed to handle and transport tracked machinery, maintenance machinery, and other heavy equipment, materials, and supplies supporting work throughout the New York City Transit system. The base contract for the purchase of 65 flat cars was awarded in June 2018 as a result of a non-competitive RFP under an immediate operating need. The two options were included in this base contract. Option A for 27 cars awarded in October 2020, and option B, the subject of this action. Based on an anticipated award in May 2022, the first flat car will be delivered in July 23, and the final flat car will be delivered in September 25. I submit this item for your approval.
Okay, motion. I'll let the chair
So moved.
second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstentions. Okay, motion passes. Okay, Kavesh, I think we're done with procurements, yes?
Yes, no other procurements. Thank
All
you.
right, so we have some consolidated financial and operational reports, 53 to 104 pages. Any questions that management can answer for you folks? I'm going to just make one. Go ahead, please, Ada. Oh, I'm going to make one just remark for the group to look at. I think page 82 and 83, they're very good data on the passengers to date. I just think it's a really great chart for you to look at, to keep in mind all the issues we've been talking about. I'm not just saying all this to be pedantic. I'm reminding us all because the public is listening, the press is listening, the gap we have is real. Until we get people back to work, this is not going to change. The one thing I'd ask staff about these charts, I don't know, maybe Jai, you put it together, this goes through the end of February of 2020. That was the last month before all this started with COVID. So soon the comparison is going to look real squirrely, and it's not going to look nearly as strict. Because right now you can look at this chart and say, oh, that's when it was normal. I'm going to ask you going forward this revenue chart to have a separate column for the year 2019. I know it's going to make it a little tighter. Maybe you reduce it down to millions instead of to the decimal it is now. But I think we need the comparison back to when ridership was normal, because otherwise we're going to think we're doing great. And our budget is fixed towards the old normal, not the new normal. I'm sure. It would be great for that chart. Okay, David, floor is yours for real estate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real estate has 5 action items for consideration and approval. There's one item for Long Island Railroad, an agreement with Mill Creek Residential Trust to construct a transit-oriented development on the commuter parking lot at Westbury Station. And Bob Paley, the Director of Transit-Oriented Development, is here to answer any questions regarding that action item. And we have 4 action items for Metro North. The first is a license agreement with the City Winery for food and beverage uses in Grand Central Terminal. The second is a license agreement with Manhattan News for a retail convenience location at Harlem 125th Street. The third is a license agreement with the County of Westchester for the operation and maintenance of the North White Plains commuter parking lot. And the last is a modification of lease terms with Brew LLC for the station building in Pearl River. There are also 3 additional information items. Happy to answer any questions regarding any of them.
Anybody? Questions? None? Victor, please.
So this license agreements for like City Winery and the Brew. What say do we have? I mean, there's land they're using, right? A concession, I'm assuming, right?
For Pearl River, it's the station building itself.
What type of mechanisms do we have to, when we're looking at this, to say, hey, is your facility accessible? In these license agreements, is there anything we can do?
Well, accessibility is on us as the owner and the landlord.
Okay. So
we do compel them to comply with all laws, federal and otherwise. So part of their plan review would be accessibility.
And it happens here at MTA.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, and I'd be interested just as a commuter and a frequenter of City Winery. Could you just tell us what that actually is going to be? Are you gonna think, yeah, what? Usually, but usually City Winery has a nice music component. But what's going on?
There will be a music component.
Oh.
There'll be ambient music.
Oh,
we want to make
well,
sure
that's
that
not no bands.
Well, there will be ensemble bands,
Oh.
absolutely. But the key piece there is that the noise level in that formal main waiting room in no way competes with train announcements in the main concourse. So toward that end, we had 2 tests with their musicians, a lunch hour and an evening rush, to test the decibel level. Metro North set the decibel level at 90, and any kind of music activations there. It's bistro, kind of like a cabaret seating around a small pedestal, and we've limited the ensemble to, I think, 4 pieces. And it's really intended to be ambient music, which supports a full-blown food and beverage use in the old main waiting room area, and then also have a gastropub in the interior space.
Sorry, can you just be more specific? When you say the old main waiting...
Vanderbilt Hall, which is the old
Vanderbilt
main
Hall.
waiting room.
Oh.
The one side we use for events, the east
The
side,
one
the
that
west
has like
side
a bagel shop now, or a Danish bagel?
They used to.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
gone.
it's been
Okay.
closed now, yeah.
All right. Well, I must say I applaud City Winery for doing this. I think the city needs it. I think Grand Central will benefit as well as the community. So with that, all in favor say... we took a motion already, yes? Oh, may I have a motion to do
I
a
make a motion, I so moved.
second? Taking all the procurements together
Yes.
for real estate. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. Sir, anything else you want to say, David?
I'm not sure that concludes our
Okay,
remarks.
good. Me? No, I will not be a guest performer at City Winery. My voice is not like Kavesh's. It's not as mellifluous. Anyway, can I have a motion to adjourn? Second, all in favor say aye. Okay, see you next month. Thank you all. Thank you, staff.